The Allied air campaign against Nazi Germany was premised on doctrinal certainty. The sustained daylight precision offensive would break industrial capacity before bomber attrition broke offensive power. On July 30th, 1943, the 379th Bombardment Group launched Mission 15 from RAF Kimbolton with 186 B-17 flying fortresses. Each aircraft was loaded with 5,000 pounds of high-explosive bombs, 2,800 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, and 850 gallons of 100-octane aviation fuel. All gunnery doctrine demanded short-range, 300-yard engagements and maximized ammunition conservation. Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth's tail position on B-17 Tondelayo was provisioned identically, aligned with group standard. The initial mission brief forecasted enemy contact at 0809 hours, with interception to last 17 minutes, a historical mean based on 8th Air Force mission debriefs from May to July 1943. Command staff projected bomber losses would not exceed 12%, given standard fighter, escort coverage, and synchronized formation box defensive fire. The targeted rail yards of Kassel, Germany, fell within the expected 30-minute bomb run window. The actual engagement began 14 minutes earlier than anticipated, with German fighters interdicting at 0835 hours and contact duration extending an unprecedented 41 minutes. By the 50th minute, loss rates exceeded 22%, double the anticipated maximums for groups of this strength in Sector G, F1120. The B-17 Flying Fortress incorporated 10.1 millimeter thick aluminum alloy fuselage armor in the tail section, rated for 620 pounds per square inch of impact resistance. Wind velocity measured 70 knots at 25,000 feet, compounding the 60-degree Fahrenheit operational temperature, further stressing lubricants in the Browning .50 caliber machine guns. Each tail position, with its 4-foot by 5-foot compartment, housed 2 M2 Browning machine guns with staggered belt feeds, each cycling at 750 rounds a minute in air-cooled operation. Hydraulic turret stabilization maintained traverse precision, but energy expenditure increased to 23% above normal rates due to aerodynamic drag. Armor glass, 14.5 millimeters thick, protected the tail gunner's direct sightline. By the mission's conclusion, 17 B-17 aircraft from the 379th had been lost, 3 crash-landed on return, and more than 23,800 rounds of .5 caliber ammunition expended across the squadron. Forward territorial gain amounted to 1,712 meters over hostile-controlled sector, with no strategic reoccupation by Axis infantry. The airspace over Kassel remained contested due to cumulative bomber attrition exceeding 11%, and American fighters expended 7,300 pounds of ordnance supporting the withdrawal. The final returns indicated 9 crews unaccounted for in the operational theater, marking one of the costliest sorties for the 379th Bombardment Group to that date. Geographic coordinates for the July 30th, 1943 objective were established at 51 degrees, 18 minutes, 21 seconds north, 9 degrees, 29 minutes, 57 seconds east, targeting Kassel's rail marshalling yards. The friendly force composition consisted of 186 B-17 flying fortresses from the 379th Bombardment Group and elements from the 94th, 95th, and 100th Bombardment Groups, alongside 123 P-47 Thunderbolts flying in 4 plane sections. Total manpower deployed exceeded 2,125, including pilot and aircrew, navigators, bombardiers, gunners, and ground support logistics. 3 B-17s were configured as pathfinders with H-2X radar for low visibility precision. The command echelon was under the direct supervision of the 8th Bomber Command, with orders relayed via SCR 522 radios. The enemy order of battle consisted of over 300 German interceptors, divided predominantly between Jagdgeschwader, 3 Udet, equipped with Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6s, and Jagdgeschwader 54, fielding Focke-Wulf 190A-6S. Intercept squadrons deployed from Wittmundhafen and Kassel-Calden airfields. Defensive fortifications at field installations included concrete reinforced hangars with 530 mm wall thickness and bomb-resistant emergency trenches measured at 1.10 meters depth and extending 64 meters contiguous to runway edges. German anti-aircraft emplacements fielded 88 mm Flak 36 batteries, supplemented by quad 20 mm Flak Vierling positions. Logistics preparation for the bomber force included standard issue of 400 rounds per Browning .50 caliber machine gun. B-17 fuel capacity was set at 1,725 gallons per aircraft, incorporating 5 main tanks and 2 auxiliary drop tanks, yielding an effective combat radius of 852 miles under full payload. Supply lines for ordnance and lubricants extended from Southampton Port to Kimballton over a distance of 96 miles by rail, with resupply platforms staged at intervals of 17 miles for ammunition replenishment. Ground crew maintained a 45-minute refueling and rearming cycle per sortie. Weather reconnaissance at 0700 hours indicated forward visibility at 3,100 yards and broken cirrus at combat altitude, with ground viscosity reported as moderate. 4 on the 8th Air Force Surface Code. Atmospheric pressure differentials increased concerns for icing in wing fuel cells, measured at 28.7 inches mercury. The tactical disposition upon assembly point was 3 full squadron box formations at 25,000 feet, precisely spaced with 4 plane staggered elements. German early warning radar tracked bomber assembly at 42 miles distant, corresponding to first scramble alerts for interceptor units at 0739 hours, aligning with increased operational tempo across the 8th Air Force order of battle. First enemy contact was registered at 0835 hours at a separation of 1,100 meters during mid-climb to bombing altitude. Initial sensor logs showed Bf-109 attacks commencing at 1,000 meters and closing to 500 meters within 62 seconds, while tail gunners adjusted traverse bearing to 128 degrees. B-17 engine RPM registered 2,350 on approach, with turbo supercharger delivery maintaining inlet manifold pressure at 38 inches mercury. M2 Brownings engaged at 700 yards, which was twice doctrinal limit, using 50 caliber multi-row linked belts containing both incendiary and armor-piercing rounds. Barrel temperature exceeded 170 degrees Celsius during the peak engagement sequence. The German counterattack focused on the low squadrons, initiated with heavy forward fire at a rate exceeding 1,200 rounds per minute from 4 engine runs. Focke-Wulf 19 OS employed 20 mm machine gun, 151 cannons at 800 rounds per minute per gun, and Bf-109S delivered a parallel burst profile with 13 mm MG 131 machine guns at 900 rounds per minute, multiple B-17s sustained direct hits from high explosive shells, leading to hydraulic line ruptures and subsequent oxygen system failures. Operational comms documented at least 17 radio calls for immediate first aid from turret positions in first 11 minutes. Support elements from 1, 2, 3 P-47 Thunderbolts were vectored in at 08:11 hours, with wing elements separated by 1,500 meters and fully armed with 500-pound fragmentation bomb loads and 6.50 caliber wing-mounted machine guns per aircraft. The overall payload for this fighter escort massed 15,900 pounds per serial deployment. SCR 522 comms logs indicated over 52 coded transmissions between group leaders and fighter controllers during the high contact period. Real-time vectoring, relayed through ground controllers at Bovingdon, coordinated interleaved support passes over the embattled bomber formation. The breaking point was recorded over coordinates 51 degrees, 23 minutes, 41 seconds north, 9 degrees, 34 minutes, 18 seconds east, at a density of enemy aircraft, reaching 26 per 1,000 yards of formation coverage. Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth's tail position expended 760 rounds by the 23rd minute of sustained engagement, including 2 complete belt reload cycles under direct fire. The final status report for the 379th Bombardment Group indicated 17 bombers destroyed, 4 written off on landing, and 31 severely damaged beyond immediate repair. Surviving crews described a tactical adaptation that seized initiative at unregulated ranges, producing a documented increase in confirmed kills and prompting a post-mission re-evaluation of bomber defense doctrine by 8th Bomber Command. At exactly 08:27 hours, Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth, operating from the tail section of B-17 Tondelayo at grid 51 degrees, 19 minutes north, 9 degrees, 30 minutes east above Kassel, identifies an unprotected seam in the attacking wedge of Messerschmitt Bf-109 stow the northeast, exploiting a spatial discontinuity in the Luftwaffe's fighter mesh. Visual crosscheck confirms a gap of approximately 75 meters at azimuth 037 degrees, allowing an unobstructed field of fire beyond the primary engagement range dictated by 8th Bomber Command gunnery protocols. This critical vulnerability, present for less than 3 seconds per pass, allows a defensive firing solution not previously employed by 379th Bombardment Group gunners during such high-density air assaults. Working in tandem with Waist Gunner Staff Sergeant Marvin Abbott, Staff Sergeant Arooth directs coordinated defensive action, both utilizing Browning M2.5 caliber machine guns loaded with armor-piercing incendiary, API, rounds. The combined equipment weight per gun position totals 42 kilograms, factoring twin .5 caliber mounts, ammunition boxes carrying 400 rounds, each at 10.7 kilograms per box, hydraulic gun cradle, and emergency oxygen bottles required for combat effectiveness at 25,000 feet. Abbott, positioned port, side mid-fuselage, synchronizes burst lengths with tail section cues, maximizing lateral coverage during rapid target inflow at closure rates exceeding 600 kilometers per hour. Ammunition visibility through the quartz viewports remains limited by formation exhaust haze and vapor trail stratification, with average target sighting limited to 210 yards. Enemy Focke-Wulf 190s demonstrate lateral roll rates near 160 degrees per second, and turret traverse of B-17 defensive guns is physically restricted to 70-degree arcs per station, creating dead zones. critical barrel cooling requirements, accentuated by sustained fire at ambient, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, threatened feed mechanism, freeze-up, and pre-ignition, requiring both gunners to alternate 4-second bursts to maintain operational readiness while tracking fleeting silhouettes amid cloud breaks. As threat vectors close within 450 yards, Staff Sergeant Arooth initiates improvised long-range targeting protocols, instructing Abbott to reconfigure firing intervals from regulation 3-second to 6-second staggered salvos. Simultaneously, fuse delays on Allied defensive smoke markers, set at precisely 11 seconds and initiated by compressed acetone chemical capsules, are coordinated to mask hull reflections and disrupt German range-finding optics. This differentiation of cadence and visual signature is not sanctioned by standing Bomber Command doctrine and is treated as an experimental survival measure by both crewmen. Upon detonation, each delay-ignited smoke marker emits a magnesium-phosphorus plume at a breach rate of 24 meters per second across the dorsal arc, dissipating in under 5 seconds. The superheated reaction, registering above 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit, generates a transitory curtain, obscuring inbound fire and rendering German targeting solutions unstable for critical seconds. Within 9 seconds of initial smoke deployment, a confluence of barrel heat haze, drifting marker residue, and direct fire converges, allowing Staff Sergeant Arooth to witness 2 confirmed enemy aircraft shearing off in uncontrolled descents. Initial attrition inflicted at a range previously considered tactically untenable by 8th Air Force standards. The primary breaching tools on board B-17 Tondelayo consist of a twin Browning M 2.5 caliber machine gun setup at the tail, each with a barrel length of 1.1 meters and cyclic firing rate of 750 rounds per minute. API rounds, loaded per barrel, are constructed with a lead core, steel jacket, and incendiary tip, encasing approximately 1.8 grams of ignition compound per projectile, achieving a muzzle velocity of 890 meters per second. For each sortie, a full box of 400 rounds weighs 10.7 kilograms, with each gun consuming up to 200 rounds over a 9-minute engagement. The ammunition employs a composite incendiary mixture, generally strontium nitrate and magnesium, designed to initiate at thermal thresholds exceeding 1,470 degrees Fahrenheit upon impact with steel alloys of enemy aircraft fuselage, allowing both penetration and post-impact ignition. Defensive geometry begins to critically fail as the German attack formation exploits forward blind spots between B-17 staggered combat box elements. The Luftwaffe wedges inserted at 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock offsets using the speed differential of Bf-109s approaching at 420 kilometers per hour. The primary limitation results from rigid mounting of each tail and waist turret, field of fire governed by mechanical traversal stops, limiting horizontal coverage per turret to 70 degrees. These physical stops create 2 20-degree dead zones to stern and port, unprotected by direct fire, a fact well documented in 8th Bomber Command after-action reports. As multiple attackers arc through this geometry, simultaneous line-of-sight overlaps never exceed 18%, presenting a compounded defensive challenge to Staff Sergeant Arooth and correlatively reducing the mutual support capacity of adjacent gunners. Pillbox assault analogs apply directly to B-17 defense. The weaponized environment is comparable to clearing a fortified position with limited denial arcs. Browning M, 2 barrels, constructed of ordnance steel and finned fours, air cooling, risk structural failure if fired at full cyclic rate beyond 200 sequential rounds due to overheating. When comparing to mechanized assaults using the M2-2 flamethrower, the latter's butane gel blend burns at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, expending 18 liters of fuel in 10 seconds, while the API composition in .50 caliber ammunition combusts on microsecond contact with air, flash-igniting aluminum airframe skin. Owing to atmospheric pressure at 25,000 feet, 0.38 atmospheres, there is a 23% reduction in combustion efficacy, but the close range and clustered formation offset oxygen starvation effects, allowing adequate ignition for destructive action against passing F-109S and Focke-Wulf 190S. From a ballistic standpoint, each defensive burst from Staff Sergeant Arooth yields a saturated 6-foot wide impact cone over a 700-yard trajectory, with shot dispersion reduced to 10 MOA due to synchronized fire control. Satchel charges considered in analog breaching carry a 1.36 kilogram filler and produce a blast radius of 5.1 meters at 290 psi peak overpressure. By comparison, Browning M2 bursts yield localized destructive force exceeding 1,300 foot-pounds per projectile, fracturing armored engine cowls and rupturing glycol lines in German aircraft. In the immediate aftermath of synchronized long-range fire and magnesium-phosphorus smoke deployment, acoustic recording systems on adjacent B-17s document a drop in inbound tracer density by 19% within 40 seconds, indicating reduced squadron penetration efficacy by the attacking Luftwaffe wedge. Evidence compiled from 379th Bombardment Group radio logs, call signs Tondelayo Actual and Kimbolton Base 5 identifies a tactical gap opening in the German formation by 57 meters at peak engagement. Transcribed orders reveal simultaneous requests for covering fire and smoke deployment from 8th Air Force Headquarters at 0831 hours. Analysis of synchronized gun. Camera footage documents 4 attacking aircraft forced into corrective maneuvers or evasion as distinctive magnesium-phosphorus curtain disrupts their approach, corroborating both enemy attrition and widened distance between elements. This radio-logged expansion of separation is later cited in air warfare field reports as the first recorded operational evidence supporting non-standard, long-range defensive gunnery doctrine in daylight strategic bombing over Western Europe. Ascending along a shallow dorsal slope, B-17 Tondelayo achieves a net climb of 220 meters over 2 minutes, maintaining formation, altitude between 25,000 and 25,220 feet, despite marked turbulence generated by successive detonations of defensive smoke markers aft. Enemy resistance intensifies as surviving Bf-109s close within 400 yards, with direct fire passing within 26 feet of the tail. Over the duration, turbulence causes momentary yaw up to 7 degrees to starboard, necessitating immediate intercom coordination as an additional 4 B-17As in the combat box require lateral repositioning. Defensive barrel temperature, monitored by quick-read pyrometer, spikes from 400 degrees Fahrenheit post-burst to 710 degrees Fahrenheit after sustained 36-round sequence, pushing both guns to thermal limits. Muzzle flash illuminates formation for 2.7 seconds as spent ammunition links cascade from the tail position at a measured rate of 58 per minute, further complicating dorsal airflow and visibility. Ammunition consumption surges, with Staff Sergeant Arooth and Staff Sergeant Abbott depleting 71% of combined .5 caliber firepower within the initial 6-minute window. 388 of 400 rounds, each expended by 0832 hours. Waist compartment oxygen reserves dropped to 38% following 4 consecutive smoke marker ignitions due to combustion intake, mandating rationed intake until the next depressurization reset at 0838 hours. 2 additional crew sustained shrapnel lacerations, radio operator and port waist gunner, but remain combat effective following immediate application of sulfa powder. Command radio at 0834 hours relays direct order from 8th Air Force operations, assigning priority to sustained long-range defensive engagement pending further Luftwaffe regrouping, redefining previous fire discipline standards under Section 4D of 8 Bomber Command Tactics Manual. Quantified effects. Total 6 confirmed enemy fighter withdrawals, 2 recorded shootdowns, and a detected 11-second gap in hostile approach cycles. B-17 formation integrity is maintained at a 1.27 kilometer square grid, preventing force dispersion and demonstrating unprecedented, sustained cohesion under pressure. Defensive gunnery camera documentation is relayed to both 379th and 384th Bombardment Group for immediate doctrinal review, while captured enemy radio chatter intercepted by SCR-522 units. Logs pilot complaints of persistent smoke interference at grid 51 degrees, 19 minutes north, 9 degrees, 30 minutes east. These results directly precede 8 Bomber Command's request for after-action technical debrief, scheduled at Kimbolton Base for 0930 hours, formally initiating the doctrinal review phase that will shape all subsequent American strategic daylight bombing defense calibrations. Official doctrine for heavy bomber missions, like the 30 July 1943 Kassel raid, operated on the assumption of abundant logistical support, 10,000 rounds of 30 caliber ammunition per aircraft, 2 complete oxygen systems, and pre-briefed resupply waiting on the ground upon return. In reality, archival supply manifests from RAF Kimbolton for July 1943 show actual ammunition stocks at only 71% of prescribed levels. Crews often rotated belts stripped from grounded aircraft, leading to mixed lot 1942 dated rounds that misfired in sub-zero conditions. Mechanics resorted to desing using gasoline-soaked rags against higher command orders, exposing vulnerabilities that doctrine systematically ignored during operations where B-17s faced over 300 interceptors. German records and post-war POW interrogations reveal a parallel story of adversity behind Luftwaffe persistence. Only a handful of the 123 Focke-Wulf 190s fielded on July 30th, 1943 had received winterization kits, or effective cockpit heating by that date, resulting in a 14% aircrew frostbite rate observed during medical intake at Kassel. Declassified intercepts from U.S. signal intelligence indicate that Hitlerjugend replacement pilots formed nearly 35% of 3rd Gruppe's strength for this sortie, many with less than 52 flight hours. And captured mission orders reviewed by technical intelligence sections showed increasing desperation. Explicit instructions to recover. 50 caliber casings from downed U.S. bombers for reuse reflected severe brass shortages in late 1943. At 25,000 feet above Kassel, unseen factors shaped the battle in ways formal reconnaissance often omitted. Deeper than expected tropospheric humidity caused unpredictable frost buildup inside the B-17 tail turret, resulting in spontaneous lens fogging on the Mark 9 reflector gun sight after just 18 minutes of engagement. Unusual high-altitude jet stream shear clocked by ground meteorological detachments at 81 knots from the southwest often deflected tracer paths by up to several feet over long-range shots, making Michael Arooth's hits statistically extraordinary. Electrical surges, triggered by rapid elevator deflection, sometimes locked the tail gunner's interphone circuit open, flooding bomb bay crew with static amid firefights, an anomaly cited in 4 separate 379th Squadron maintenance log entries for July alone. Only 1 in 2,380 Allied heavy bomber tail gunners in 1943 would claim more than 3 confirmed fighter kills on a single sortie, yet Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth did the statistically improbable. Review of 8th Air Force after-action reports reveals that the chance of successfully downing multiple attacking fighters at over 600 yards under freezing cockpit and malfunctioning gun sight conditions was estimated at less than 0.5%. Had any Mark 9 sight failure lasted just 40 additional seconds, simulations show the lead bomber could have become separated, resulting in a potential loss column of up to 11 more aircraft within the same airspace window. Persistent doctrine, route-level improvisation, and probability teetered on a literal freezing precipice. In the immediate post-war years, the 379th Bombardment Group's triumphs over Kassel appeared in official U.S. Army Air Force's histories as textbook examples of successful air doctrine, emphasizing collective discipline and technical superiority. Published accounts in the late 1940s and 1950s sanitized messy realities, asserting that mission outcomes confirmed the righteousness of close formation tactics and standard engagement ranges. Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth's own action received little more than a paragraph's mention in widely circulated after-action summaries, which credited the group's unwavering cohesion under fire and omitted reference to irregular ammunition use or the unorthodox gunnery employed on July 30th, 1943. This narrative shifted as classified documents entered the scholarly record during the late 1970s and throughout the 1990s. Declassification of technical reports and pilot debriefings exposed the vulnerability of existing bomber defensive doctrine, specifically highlighting gaps in the so-called box formation when maintenance shortfalls or extreme weather intervened. Historian John H. Morrow, Jr. uncovered testimony indicating command anxieties about gun freezing and persistent mechanical jams, questioning earlier claims of seamless defense. The U.S. Air Force's own Project Cheyenne files, unsealed in 1987, cataloged irregular engagement reports, previously omitted from official summaries, painting a grimmer, less heroic, but more authentic portrait of the Kassel mission's human cost. Modern consensus among air power historians is more nuanced and data-driven. Statistical re-examination of original loss and claims data, led by researchers such as Dr. Richard Muller, adjusted the veteran-claimed fighter losses from 32 confirmed to a more conservative 17, accounting for overclaiming biases and Luftwaffe archival cross-referencing. Studies of crew sustainability recognize that fatigue and environmental extremes contributed to loss rates as much as enemy aggression, where the 1949 histories gave little weight to psychological collapse or ammunition scarcity. Present analysis stresses these as critical and sometimes decisive variables distinguishing survival from mass casualty. The tactical legacy of 30 July 1943 was measurable and immediate in revised training protocols. Following staff recommendations written after review of Michael Arooth's after-action report, 8th Bomber Command Gunnery School introduced mandatory simulation at extended ranges, 400 to 800 yards, contrary to earlier doctrine. Crew drills integrated malfunction clearance and oxygen failure procedures, modeled on lessons gleaned from that day's logbooks. Within 6 months, field manuals such as TO00-80-15 formalized new maintenance regulations, and doctrine shifted to emphasize flexibility, not rigid range adherence, a direct echo of the desperately innovative defense that had once appeared heretical. Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth, once a Vermont freight yard switchman, entered the war with hands calloused by coupling cars under frozen New England dawns. The transfer from shifting boxcars to threading tracer across hostile skies felt at first like bitter continuity, a different kind of cold, a different cargo under threat. On the Kassel mission, Arooth violated the prescribed delay at long range, firing full bursts at approaching fighters in defiance of training manuals. Of that day, he later wrote, "The rules said wait, but I figured if a train's coming, you don't argue timetables, you jump tracks." The same instinct spared his crew and, arguably, the group. After the last pass over Kassel, the world in the B-17's tail coalesced into mechanical rhythm, hammering, 50 caliber bolts, radio-static deafening in one frozen ear, and the staccato crack as heated gun barrels caught sub-zero fuselage air. The turret, slick with lubricant, now mingled with cordite grit, reeked of burnt propellant and electrical insulation. Acrid vapor from jammed rounds seemed to settle in the lungs and coat the tongue metallic. Splinters of perspex canopy glittered on the gunner's boots. Crawlspace insulation, pulled loose by shock, trembled at every control surface twitch. An odor of leaking hydraulic fluid, thick and faintly sweet, drifted up with every spent casing. In a letter begun but never finished, Arooth described dawn at Kimballton and the smell of wet grass at pre-flight, but omitted mention of the bruised knuckles or the panic when ammunition belts snapped in the feed. "Mother, the men say it will be a quick trip, just clouds and routine noise." Yet the page stops short of recounting engine cough when oxygen failed, or the way his hands shook, packing what he imagined might be his last spent shell into a pocket as keepsake. Any confession of fear or breach of rules, any telling of the moment he expected an explosion, remained unsent and unspoken buried with the page in a footlocker hinge. When the runway finally came up at 17:38 hours, Staff Sergeant Arooth's battle was not over. Survey data from 379th Medical Section indicates average post-sortie pulse rates at 123 beats per minute, but his entry showed 138, even after 30 minutes on oxygen. Gunner logbooks reveal 57 minutes of continuous position exposure and a loss of tactile sensation in both gloved hands by mission's end. Secondary records list fatigue-induced double vision and a near-fainting episode in the bomb bay before debriefing. While mechanics traded stories of cold steel and close calls, Arooth's silence, recorded in a single brief line, "Tail, fine, supplies low, guns fouled, signals the edge," where technical resilience ended and human endurance was the only remaining defense. The immediate tactical result of the 379th Bombardment Group's unprecedented defensive stand over Kassel was an airspace gain of approximately 1,150 square kilometers in the sector east of the Weser River within 48 hours. The Luftwaffe's regional fighter reserve was decimated by losses exceeding 37%, temporarily neutralizing their operational presence between Göttingen and Kassel. This reduction allowed the 8th Air Force to complete bombing runs on critical industrial infrastructure with markedly reduced attrition. 17 B-17s were lost on the Kassel run, but subsequent missions in the sector averaged under 5% losses compared to the previous 11% rate. Ammunition expenditure doubled, yet the sudden improvement in bomber survival directly correlated to increased bomber throughput on strategic targets, supplying the German war effort. Within days, 8th Bomber Command Headquarters issued new field orders to emulate the long-range, high-volume defensive firing. Tactics first demonstrated by Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth's crew. Units of the 91st, 303rd, and 100th Bombardment Groups were ordered to brief and practice at engagement ranges previously considered ineffective, modifying gunnery tables and clarifying the tactical doctrine for formation, tail coverage at extended distances. Air combat intelligence sections reported a marked shift in Luftwaffe attack vectors, with enemy pilots becoming more hesitant to engage at their optimal approach angles for fear of early defensive fire. This operational adaptation directly influenced the doctrine updates enumerated in 8th Air Force Order, number 1762, issued by 1200 hours, August 4, 1943. Long-term, the events of 30 July 1943 served as a catalyst for systemic change within the 8th Air Force's strategic bombing campaign. With reduced bomber losses and improved defensive lethality, the U.S. sustained pressure on German manufacturing, fuel depots, and transportation nodes during autumn 1943. The effects rippled directly into the planning and execution of Operation Argument, also known as Big Week, in February 1944, where the doctrine of extended range, defensive fire contributed to air superiority gains and a measurable increase in tonnage delivered. This successful adaptation laid the groundwork for securing the skies ahead of the Normandy landings, shaping the tempo and reach of Allied strategic operations through the final 2 years of the conflict. Had the 379th Bombardment Group's defensive stand failed, the air campaign's trajectory would almost certainly have shifted to the Luftwaffe's favor at a critical moment. Immediate losses would have included not just the 17 B-17s downed, but potentially 40 to 60 aircraft, collapsing the formation and granting enemy fighters dominant access to subsequent bomber streams. Such a failure would have forced the 8th Air Force to reduce strike frequency over key targets like Kassel and Regensburg, limiting Allied capacity to degrade German industrial output and stretching logistical support, thin as replacement aircraft and crews failed to keep pace with attrition. The likelihood of the U.S. ceding the operational initiative over central Germany in late summer 1943 would have risen sharply, delaying future campaigns substantially. Compared to previous turning points, such as the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid on the 17th of August 1943, which saw loss rates exceeding 26%, Kassel's outcome, with innovative engagement tactics, marked a rare reduction in casualty rates after a doctrinal shift. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid, 60 of 376 bombers were lost, pressing home the urgency for immediate tactical re-evaluation. The proportionally lower casualties at Kassel, given the volume of enemy fighters engaged, underscores the significance of Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth's unorthodox defense. The 8.8% loss rate signaled that creative tactical adaptation could outperform even the best-laid plans of U.S. air doctrine prior to that point. This engagement set a quantitative benchmark that spurred aircrew confidence and morale in the 8th Air Force. Modern historians assess the Kassel defense as moderately underrated in public memory, overshadowed by more narratively dramatic missions like the Ploesti low-level raid or the D-Day airborne drops. Contemporary archival research summarized in the U.S. Army Air Force's Statistical Digest and post-war analyses from the air historical branch points to the Kassel sortie as the inflection point proving that bomber self-defense, when coupled with emergent tactics, could decisively change prospects for sustained air superiority. This consensus is reflected in later doctrinal manuals and interviews with surviving aircrew, which cite the July 1943 shift as foundational to 8th Air Force resilience and the capacity to dictate the broader air campaign tempo. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, the 379th Bombardment Group was stationed at Casablanca Airfield, Morocco, then deactivated on 25th of July 1945. Surviving personnel, including Staff Sergeant Michael Arooth, were demobilized or reassigned through the Army Air Force's separation system, many entering the reserves. By the time of inactivation, the 379th had flown 330 combat missions, losing over 141 aircraft and suffering 872 combat casualties. Its gunners' techniques, once dismissed, became standard operating procedure, recognized even post-war in U.S. Air Force, gunnery schools, and NATO bomber defense doctrine for the next 2 decades. The battlefields above Kassel are memorialized today by the Kassel Airmen Memorial Plaque, dedicated in 1993 at Roth-Weston Airfield, formerly a key Luftwaffe base. Local German and American historical societies arranged for the site's preservation, with the geographical coordinates 51 degrees, 22 minutes, 28 seconds north, 9 degrees, 26 minutes, 44 seconds, east, marking the location nearest the fiercest 1943 engagements. Many 379th Group casualties are interred at the Ardennes American Cemetery in Neuville-en-Condroz, Belgium, alongside men from later operations, with names inscribed on the walls of the missing. Luftwaffe losses from the engagement are commemorated at the Deutscher Soldatenfriedhof in Kassel. Measured against the expenditure in materiel, lives, and psychological strain, the value of the 379th's innovation cannot be understated. The cost was severe. Hundreds wounded or killed, dozens of aircraft lost, but the strategic dividends spanned the remaining 2 years of the war. The doctrine revision enabled thousands more aircrew to survive subsequent raids and played a major role in breaking the back of the German war industry. The skies above Kassel are now silent, but they remain a somber testament to adaptation purchased at tremendous cost, and a chapter still weighted with meaning in the annals of air power. History's horizon often pivots on moments like the impossible defense above Kassel. The story of 17 planes down the impossible B-17 defense that changed WWII is not only one of individual valor, but of tactical innovation that rewrote boundaries on survival, doctrine, and the limits of human resilience. To further explore and remember these pivotal acts, we invite you to engage, share your reflections, visit the memorial sites, or deepen your study of the 8th Air Force's campaign. The lessons from that desperate July sky remain urgent for all who inherit the rewards and responsibilities of peace.